Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Friday, September 19th around here, and we got a great week 4 right around the corner. We already got one game last night, big time win for... Now I'm blanking on the teams as I say it. Apologies for that. But we do have a very, very interesting thing. Oh, Rice got a win over Charlotte. Apologies to the Owls. But at the end of the day, let's get into a lot of different things we want to get into before we get into this week 4. I'll give some final thoughts on week 4, some injury updates, some just general things that I've been thinking about since I made my picks on Wednesday. Then we'll get into a little superlative talk. A number of really good games, some great under-the-radar games, a quarterback battle that's not the best of the weekend, but I think the most interesting of the weekend, and a number of other stuff there. And then we'll do a little bit of a headline catch-up. We will talk about Dabo Swinney's rant, for lack of a better word, that he had earlier this week. We'll talk about a number of things. The spring portal window, no more. We'll talk about all of that, and we will get into all that towards the end of the show. But let's jump into this because we got huge games this upcoming weekend. It's kind of one of those weekends I saw over on Unnecessary Roughness. They were talking about it and they called it kind of the sneaky weekend because so many of these games are massive. They're absolutely massive for the CFP race, for different conference races, for maybe like the around 8 through 12 of the CFP. This week could decide a lot of that. You have a Texas Tech-Utah game, which is going to be really, really close, could put someone in the Big 10, Big 12 title, and as we all know, they don't get an automatic top 4 spot if they were to win that, so they're probably fitting somewhere around the 8-9 spot. Then you have Auburn, Oklahoma, a team that very much wants to get into this thing. Both have very tough schedules coming forward, but they could very well go 9-3 or 10-2 and fit into the 11 spot or the 10 spot. And then Michigan, Nebraska, same exact thing. Illinois, Indiana. Someone's got to be that 4th team in the Big Ten. Very well could be one of these teams. Very well could be a USC team that plays much later in the night. But let's go ahead and jump into this and let's talk about, first, let's go and get into the Texas Tech-Utah game. I think, to me, this is the most interesting game. This is the America's Conference, as I like to call it, as a lot of people like to call it at this point. And I do think, the more that I think about this game, the more I think someone's probably walking out as a massive favorite to at least make it to the CFP. And I think they might be walking out as a team that people are watching to make a little bit of a run in the CFP, because the one difference between these two teams and just about everyone else in the conference, Iowa State kind of holds up just a little bit in this conversation among a couple other teams, but the lines of scrimmage in this game are different than pretty much everywhere else in the conference, especially the Utah O-line and the Texas Tech D-line. They're different. They're just a little bit different from a size, athleticism perspective as just about everyone else in the conference. So the question coming into this one is, who wins that battle? And how much do they win it by? Because I think the reality is, if we walk out of this game and Utah ran for 225 yards on the ground and David Dampier had all the time in the world to throw the ball, we're probably sitting there and saying that Utah offensive line is going to push around absolutely everyone in the entire country, and they're going to push around specifically everyone in the Big 12. If you have a good offensive line and a dynamic playmaker at quarterback, you can do a lot of damage. You can do a lot of things that could be downright special this year. Now, obviously, you don't want to get too ahead of your skis, but just to say, if the Utah offensive line rolls over Texas Tech, I don't know if anyone else has a shot to compete with this group. And then on the other side, same exact conversation. If the Texas Tech defensive line, the rebuilt defensive line through the portal, if they're able to get consistent push, if they're able to slow down the run game for Utah, get after Devin Dampier, have a couple of sacks on the day, and make these two tackles, obviously they won't play poorly, but at the very least get a couple of openings and make some big plays, I think we're walking out of it saying there's no offensive line in the conference that has nearly what Utah has. No one's going to be able to stop these guys coming off the edge, and that's a total difference maker when you talk about not only the Big 12, but what you could possibly do with a CFP berth. So this is a game that I think just has so much potential upside for both these teams. I think someone could very well leave as the on-odds favorite, not only to win the Big 12, but maybe one of the top 5 or 6 teams in the CFP championship race, because that's how good some of these units are on these two teams. If one team walks out there and just rolls, we're going to have a really interesting conversation on Monday. Now, I don't necessarily think one team is going to roll in this game. I think it'll be relatively evenly fought, but it's going to come down to a couple of things, and it's great line of scrimmage play, as we've talked about a lot leading up to this one. The quarterback's got to make a couple of big plays. Both these guys are fully capable of doing that, particularly with their arm, and Devin Dampier a little bit more with his legs than Baron Morton. And then the head coach is going to have to make great calls. This is a very, very interesting matchup between an up-and-coming head coach and Joey McGuire that's done a great, great job building this thing up. I have a ton of respect for him as a head coach. But on the other sideline, I would argue it's a top 10 head coach in the entire country in Kyle Whittingham. He has been the absolute standard when you talk about consistency and keeping your team in the fight regardless of what the talent says. It's going to be a really fun one. And whoever wins this one is firmly looked at as the favorite in the Big 12. And frankly, I think could be looked at a little bit more than that if they're able to handle this pretty comfortably. It'll be a great one to watch. One other little thing to watch, if you haven't gotten a chance to watch the Utes yet, they're using three defenders and one guy just totally out of position on offense. Hunter Andrews, the tight end, has been getting reps at the running back position and has made the most of them. Has been a huge, huge piece for that football team and very interesting thing to watch. A talented freshman guy that is going to be a great player, maybe all over the field for them in the future. Smith Snowden, the cornerback that is going to play majority of the time on that side of the ball. He's gotten handoffs at running back. He's been played wide receiver. He's going to be an interesting watch. Landon Barton, the linebacker, he's playing wide receiver. Jackson Beanie, the safety, he's getting wide receiver reps. I don't know how much we see it in this football game, but those guys are going to be ones to watch, and definitely some interesting packages coming in there. And I can promise you, tackling a tight end that's getting a handoff is not ideal by any means. So that'll be a really interesting thing to watch, and I'm still going to lean Utah, but I think this one could be a little bit more important even than we're thinking right now. Auburn on the road at Oklahoma. This one's going to be really, really fun. It's going to come down to a couple of hinge points, and frankly, when you think about these two football programs, and we talked about it on Wednesday when we talked about this game, let's say Oklahoma lost to Michigan earlier in the year, Auburn lost to Baylor. You're probably walking into this one thinking if one of these whoever doesn't win this game is getting a lot of heat on Monday and is on a hot seat very, very quickly. Now you're in a position where both of you are undefeated. Whoever wins it, you're in a position to possibly make a CFP run and become a darling of your school very, very quickly after some big-time questions around what was going to be the future for you. So this is going to be a really interesting game, and it's going to be a moment where one team is going to take a monumental step forward, and one team is going to be sitting there thinking, did we take a step forward with our early season win, or are we still a team that just can't quite get there when we get to SEC play? It is going to be awesome to watch. The Auburn defensive line, going to be interesting to watch this one because the Oklahoma offensive line has played better. They've done some really, really good things. Their center is playing great football. Michael Fasusi has come in and played really strong for a freshman, especially. That Auburn D-line is a little bit different. You have Keyron Crawford, you have Keldrick Falk, Malik Blockton, and a ton of other guys that absolutely could blow this game up. And when I think about an Auburn win, that's kind of what it looks like. They blow up the Oklahoma offensive line. Oklahoma can't really run the ball. John Mateer can't get comfortable. A couple of those balls that we've seen him miss a little bit high and away get a little bit further, higher, and more away, and you get a couple of picks, and this thing changes on a dime. So it's going to be really interesting to watch that one unfold, specifically that battle between the Oklahoma offensive line and the Auburn defensive line. And on the other side, I think it's two of the better groups when you talk about the Oklahoma defensive line and the Auburn offensive line. Two of the better groups in the conference, and that'll be a really, really fun thing to watch. But I said it before, I'll say it again. Whichever one of these teams wins it, they feel like they have found their footing as a program. They feel like they can really start to take off and do some special things this year, including the CFP. If Oklahoma wins it, you're probably walking into Red River undefeated and a Texas team that looks relatively limpy right now that still has to go play in Gainesville before that game. So a lot on the table in this one. We'll see if Jackson Arnold can make the big throws. That's what it's going to come down to in this football game. We know they want to run the ball. You're not going to be able to run the ball on this football team unless you push them downfield with Eric Singleton, who it looks like he is going to be ready to go. Cam Coleman, all of the guys you have to find openings. The good news for them, R. Mason Thomas is going to be missing for the first half after a targeting call last week that, sure, I suppose. But at the end of the day, we'll see if Auburn can kind of exploit that, and maybe the QB run has helped just a little bit. That read option with a backup defensive end in there than Mason Thomas, who very well could be a top 60 or 90 pick in the NFL draft. But really fun one over there in Norman. And this is one of those games where 9 times out of 10, this is the biggest game in the conference this upcoming weekend, it's without question. The one we'll talk about in a second might be a little bit bigger, but regardless, we talked about it before. The Big Ten's probably looking for that fourth team. When you talk about the CFP, it's usually you're going to have 4 Big Ten teams or 4 SEC teams, 3 from the other, and we'll see how that plays out. It could be the Big Ten only gets 3, but all these teams this weekend are fighting for that 4th spot. Obviously, there's plenty of more work to do, but Nebraska, every chance to find your way to 10-2 if you're able to win this game, get into the CFP, and do the things that a lot of people expected you to do under year three in Matt Rule. And then Michigan, you unlocked the quarterback run last week. If you unlock it this week and get a big time win, you're immediately looked at as a huge dark horse, not only in the Big Ten race, but in the CFP race and maybe in the national title race. If you can put it together with Bryce Underwood, I might be a little bit ahead of myself there, but at the end of the day, it is a huge game for both these teams. Nebraska, no ranked win since 2016. First win ever since over Michigan, since 2013. A lot on the table in this football game. The X factor to me is Dane Key. I think he's a guy that just has to create openings for Dylan Raiola because it is going to be really hard to win this football game unless you get a massive advantage on the outside. Because Michigan is going to be able to at least hold serve with Nebraska, and if not, kind of top Nebraska in a number of different positions across the field. Wide receivers where you have a margin. It's where you have an Isaiah Hunter, where you have a Dane Key that can give you openings, can give you advantages where, let's say Michigan is running the football, they're running it solidly, they've gotten a couple of drives together, they've put in a touchdown drive, and it's 14-7 in Nebraska's direction. You had one big play to Dane Key and Isaiah Hunter, this game might be over because the Michigan offense is not, at least as of right now, fully equipped to come from behind. If you can hit one or two big plays downfield, it might be curtains for Michigan in this football game, kind of what we saw against Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma was a little bit more consistent, but at the end of the day, that's all it really takes against a group with not elite guys on the outside and not an elite passing game right now. You just need to find a couple of big plays. I'm still going to stick with Nebraska in this one, but I think this one's going to be special. I think we're going to walk out of it probably saying those two guys are going to be playing on Sundays for a very long time. I think this quarterback battle is downright special, and it's two guys that I think Dylan Raiola is playing higher level of football than some people would expect, I suppose, or thinking right now. And Bryce Underwood, just one of those athletes that if you're not watching him every Saturday, you are making a mistake. And then finally, the actual biggest matchup in the Big Ten this week, and it's not one that we usually be that, Illinois at Indiana. This one's really cool to me for a number of different reasons, but plainly, these are not two historic football programs. They've done some great things, especially recently. They've done some incredible things and started to build up what they're going to be in the future. I expect them to be great football programs for a long time to come. But they've been bad. Their history is not strong. Their history is not, we're going to meet up in early in the year as top 20 teams and be the marquee matchup in the Big Ten when Nebraska's playing Michigan. That doesn't happen for these two football teams. It doesn't happen for these fan bases, and it really only happened for Indiana last season. It is going to be a special moment. There's no two ways about that. I think it's going to be a really, really cool moment. You have Illinois coming in with maybe more expectations than the team that just came off the CFP appearance and is the favorite in the football game. Very, very weird dynamic around this one, but at the end of the day, I think this one's going to be really, really fun. Probably relatively slow at first, field position battle, and then you make a couple of big plays. And who is it? Is it Fernando Mendoza? Is it Luke Altmaier? A great quarterback matchup. I tend to trust it to be Omar Cooper just a little bit more. I am going to stick with Indiana, as I said on Wednesday, but it's setting up to be Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State from the Big Ten. Those are going to be your CFP teams, and we'll figure out who the other one is going to be. Maybe the other two, depending if there's like catastrophe elsewhere. But at the end of the day, one of these teams feels like they're fighting for that spot. I think the Michigan-Nebraska game, you could say the exact same thing, and we'll get a couple of matchups between those four teams the rest of the way. So just huge games that will totally decide what the Big Ten looks like, what the CFP looks like, particularly from that 6 to 12 range. These games this weekend are going to decide a lot of that. Some other random news, Lenora Sellers, it looks like he is going to be ready to go. He was questionable yesterday, but it sounds like he is going to be set to play. Probably not going to be 100%. If I had to imagine, I tend to believe he needs to be 100%, so I'm going to back up my idea that Missouri is going to win this football game. I think they're going to win it relatively comfortably, but the reality of the matter is when you have number 16 on the field, you have a shot to win every single football game you play. So that'll be really interesting to watch. We'll see how healthy he is and if he can kind of turn a corner after a relatively rough start to the season. Arch Manning, it's going to be a storyline until Arch puts it to bed, plain and simple. They get Sam Houston State this weekend, one of the worst pass defenses in the entire country. He's got to be confident. He's got to be comfortable. Everyone's talked about it. Everyone's got a million different theories. I know what I think. At the end of the day, a lot of this is in his head. A lot of this is getting caught up in the moment, getting caught up in the hype, and it totally makes sense because this is a crazy amount of hype for a kid that only started 2 games a year ago. But at the end of the day, he's just got to be able to execute and keep his mechanics in check, keep his mechanics the way that they were a year ago and have been at times this year, just a little bit more sparingly. I don't know why I said that. Excuse me, but they have not been there enough this season. He's got to figure it out one way or the other. He just has to, and he's one of those guys that uniquely talented, uniquely physically talented. I think they're going to employ the run game a little bit more. If that guy starts playing with confidence, starts playing on time, and with reckless abandon, he is going to be the player that we saw a year ago, and this thing is going to slowly turn around for Texas. If he can't turn the corner this weekend, might be time to hit the panic button around there in Austin if you haven't already, I suppose. But over at Colorado, Caden Salter is taking back over at quarterback. I don't really get it. I understand that Caden Salter is probably the best quarterback on the team right now, and I understand that you only have 2 losses. You haven't gotten into conference play yet. You don't want to throw in the towel early. I guess you did lose to Houston, so you're 0-1 in conference, but you're still in the conference race, no doubt about it. I get wanting to play the quote-unquote best quarterback. I think you got to play Julian Lewis. He's the guy that is going to take over in 26 and hopefully 27 and be the guy that really takes you from a program that popped up a little bit with an elite quarterback and elite talent on the outside and then kind of faded away to a program that just had a little bit of a blip after you lose 2 elite players in Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, and then you get a Julian Lewis and everything starts to go back upwards. I tend to believe that move is going to be made at some point this season. I don't think Colorado is going to win enough games to make it worth keeping a Caden Salter in there over a Julian Lewis, but at the end of the day, I just tend to believe it probably should have made the decision already. And then finally, just some final thoughts on Miami, Florida. It was an interesting thing that Brooks Austin over on the Film Guy Network, if you are not subscribed over there, please do. It is a absolutely incredible thing that has taught me a ton about football in the short time I've been watching. But at the end of the day, if Florida loses and Billy Napier is fired on Sunday, these players can leave and take a red shirt. They still have that opening. They've only played 4 games. That is the opening that you have. It's not to say that they're not going to fight. I fully believe that this team has heart. I fully believe that this team actually does care about Billy Napier and wants to do right by him. The problem is, if you get punched in the mouth, if Florida walks out there and they're on defense the first time around and Miami just marches down the field. They run the ball 5 times. They pass the ball 5 times. They go 75 yards in 6 minutes. And this game is 7-0 before you can blink. I can't promise that team's not going to just kind of mail it in. And I hate to say it because it's not something that those kids put their life into this. And they deserve all the respect in the world. And I believe that they're going to fight as much as they possibly can. At a certain point, the boulder just gets too heavy. It just gets too much. There's too much mental pressure. There's too much frustration. And it just kind of bubbles over and you lose that team. I hope it doesn't happen this weekend. I hope they fight to the final whistle, although I don't think it's going to be all that pretty for them. I hope they fight, and I hope a lot of them stay at Florida because I think they deserve to see what it looks like after Billy Napier and see this thing through. But at the end of the day, there's some interesting times in college football that leave some interesting decisions on the table for these young kids. So a lot of things to figure out. There's no doubt about that, and we will definitely talk about it on Sunday. Maybe they can shock the world and get a big-time win. One other quick note, Trinidad Chambliss is going to be the starter for Ole Miss versus Tulane. I tend to believe that is the right call now. Could it help Tulane just a little bit knowing it's Trinidad Chambliss as opposed to Arkansas just trying their best against a quarterback they did not know was going to be playing that afternoon. So it'll be interesting to watch all of this unfold. I think it's just one of those weekends where I feel like we're going to look back on this one as fondly as just about and as importantly as just about anyone this year. The one next week is loaded to the gills. There's no doubt about that. Marquee matchups left and right. This one just feels like it can knock some guys out of the CFP. It feels like there's a level of urgency that you don't usually have in week 4 of the college football season. But we'll get into it all. We'll talk about it all on Monday. As of right now, let's take a little bit of a break and then get into our superlatives for the weekend. We got game of the week, which could be a number of them. We got underrated game of the week. We got quarterback battle that maybe not be the best, but I tend to believe is the most interesting, and a number of other things right after this, so stick with us.